Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to another lecture. Okay, today we're looking at the final issue or the final topic in diversity. Okay, that is responding to diverse society. So, how do individuals and government alike respond to diversity in our societies? Okay, so the first one we're going to look at, or the first type of diversity we're looking at, is social cultural. Okay, and how do citizens and government respond to it? Now, for individuals, okay, we're looking at social cohesion. Okay, so we're looking at essentially how the close relationships form between individuals and groups of people actually lead to feelings of solidarity. So viewing ourselves more as one unit rather than individual units. Okay, so perhaps with technology there has been a greater, easier way for people to actually threaten social cultural diversity. Okay, but nonetheless, when people actually step up to raise awareness, to address areas of ignorance, like we mentioned in the previous topic, understanding is very important. Understanding actually helps prevent misunderstandings, obviously, right? And that misunderstanding can stop the entire the cycle of your stereotyping, your prejudice, your discrimination from happening. Okay, so raising awareness, preventing ignorance, and basically doing things appropriately, respecting other people, that comes to the very core of creating social cohesion as an individual. Okay, and as groups, this is where different individuals come together, and they actually commit themselves to create, not just maintain but create harmonious interactions. So in citizenship we actually talk about this idea called NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. Okay, WIMBY, WIMBY, welcome in my backyard, is essentially a very it's kind of an anti-NIMBY kind of thing, where it's actually led by youth, to talk about the lives of migrant workers, especially in 2020, during which we actually realized migrant workers were suffering a lot during the pandemic, in their dormitories. So WIMBY have allowed Singaporeans to actually welcome migrant workers into their neighborhoods, and more importantly, to share their appreciation, and their gratitude for what migrant workers have actually contributed to this country. Yeah, so you can read about it lah. Okay, yeah, so these are just certain messages they have given to the migrant workers. Now, on the government side of things, we are going to look at two countries, and this is where we're going to look at examples beyond Singapore, as we start to move into the ideas of the global world. So the first case study we're going to look at is acculturation in France. Okay, so France essentially is a country that practices assimilation. Assimilation is the idea that anybody that comes in, anybody with a diverse background that comes into this country, they must then adopt the belief of the majority. So whoever comes in, right, be it African people, like Asian people going into France, when they settle in France, when they choose they want to stay in France, they must change their identity, let go of their previous identity, and adopt the French identity. Okay, so they want to make it essentially any immigrants or migrants completely indistinguishable from the majority French group. Okay, France does this, for example, through secularism, where they strictly restrict religion, in their governance and society, right? And also identity is therefore, in the French sense, is nothing to do with race, nothing to do with ethnicity, nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with SCS. And that's why they actually reject uh, displays of religious identity or racial identity, except in the privacy of your own home lah. Okay, so it requires people to keep their religious beliefs and ethnic customs private. And more recently, this has become a challenge because you will realize that immigrants, to France, will start to choose to hold on very strongly to their identities, and they will want to display their religious identity public, because it is a very key part of their lives, as we've discussed before, right? So the French government has increasingly prohibited these displays, and they have cracked down on these displays. For example, in schools, France actually prohibits the display of any religious items. So Christians cannot wear their crosses, the Sikh students cannot wear their turbans, Muslim girls cannot wear the hijab, and so on and so forth. And the reason for this is because the French government believes that hindrance to national cohesion comes from these religious symbols. So by having something tangible that makes us different, again, that actually diminishes this kind of common French identity that they have. But on the other hand, okay, the communities that they belong to, the Muslims, the Sikhs in particular, okay, are starting to show their displeasure. They're feeling that their identity is being diminished, is being muted, okay, and people criticize it, okay, as going against the rights and freedom of religious expression. Yeah, so as you can see, protests by the Sikh people. And so, how does France actually enforce and ensure that his assimilation policy goes through? Okay, three types of policies. Educational has to do with how, like I said, religion is strictly disallowed in education. Okay, so there's no discussion of religion. Whatever we're doing right now here, okay, is completely illegal, right? Adaptation classes, so people from other countries who are immigrating to France, they have to go through these special classes to learn French language and identity before they can even go to school, right? And yeah, so education they believe is a great leveler. So everybody needs to start fresh, everybody needs to be the same. Okay, hence all these policies. Employment, okay, many working environments, many companies require immigrants to actually speak French to communicate in the workplace. Okay, and sad news is that a lot of people therefore cannot find jobs because as new immigrants they may not be as familiar with French. Okay, so yeah, that has led to a lot of discrimination, okay, of immigrants in France. Okay, and the last one is naturalization. Now naturalization is where new immigrants actually, when they come to France, they must attend French language classes and they must attend civic education in order to gain permanent residency, not even citizenship yet, permanent residency. So this is for everybody. No matter you are 5 years old or 55 years old or 85 years old, you must go through these civics education and language education. And the reason for this is that they want immigrants to have proficiency in French, okay, and therefore more accustomed, okay, to adopting the majority belief here. The second case study is what we're looking at, Singapore. Okay, the acculturation policy in Singapore. Okay, so in Singapore we practice integration. Okay, which is essentially you can think of it as the opposite of assimilation, but in technical sense not quite. But for the purposes of your syllabus, okay, you can think of it as the opposite. Okay, immigration forges a common ground with the groups of people already living in a host country while retaining their unique identities. What this essentially means is that there is already an existing identity, right? But when other people, new people from different backgrounds come into this society, they are not asked to conform, okay, to the existing belief, but rather we incorporate their diversity, their background into our greater mixture of identity. So like I always say, okay, Singapore's identity is a mixture of identities, okay, and that's what makes multiculturalism unique. Okay, but of course immigrants, okay, are still expected to integrate, okay, integrate as in become accustomed to how Singaporeans live, okay, and not just live their own ways lah. Okay, so it still must be a form of integration into this new society and this new society's norms. Okay, but the benefit and what is so different from assimilation is we don't do it forcefully, we do it more so by allowing them to retain the original identity but also requiring them to adapt to the commonality in the new nation. Okay, so we respect people's background but we also require them to adapt. Okay, and in Singapore, as we already know very clearly, no special rights are given. Okay, social cultural identities complement Singapore's national identity, so no one of these identities will be the one that is actually promoted or even benefits even more lah. There's no way we can do that. Now, there are a few policies that you need to know of how Singapore does this. First one is bilingualism. This is why you have to learn mother tongue. Okay, since 1966, okay, students are required to learn English and one of three mother tongues. Okay, why? Because English is the one that is serving as a lingua franca, that meaning a common language of communication. So regardless of what background you come from, being able to learn and speak English makes us so that there is a common language that we can all use to communicate, even though our mother tongue might be different. Okay, mother tongue on the other hand is mainly for you to preserve your own cultural identity. Remember, we're talking about respecting people's original background and identity. That's why we have a compromise here in that everybody maintains their identity but also have a new language, okay, common language, neutral language, okay, that allows us to communicate with one another. PCMR, okay, we have talked about this before. PCMR is the one that makes sure that Parliament does not pass any discriminatory laws that affect racial or religious groups in a very specific manner. GRCs, okay, GRCs are the ones, if you live in a GRC, you probably have more than one member of parliament, right? So this is introduced to ensure that minority groups will always be represented. So GRC is not just about fielding a group of candidates, it is also making sure that one or more of these candidates must be of a certain minority group. So for example, in certain constituencies, you must have at least one Malay candidate. In certain constituency, you must have at least one Indian candidate. EIP, okay, EIP is the one where HDB flocks, okay, do not make sure that they do not, okay, become ethnic enclaves. Okay, so how do we do this? Is we set quotas, okay, for each HDB block and each HDB estate to have a certain percentage of a certain ethnicity. Okay, so once the quota is reached, it cannot exceed the quota, okay, on a case by case basis, like at least. Okay, so this makes sure that not one entire HDB block is populated by just Chinese people or just Malay people, but there is actually a mix, okay, of Chinese, Malay, Indian, and others, okay, living together as neighbors. Okay, and this is of course for harmony and cohesion lah, essentially. And this was because that in the past, okay, during the time of British colonial rule, enclaves were very common. So the ethnic groups will actually stick to one another lah, okay, across the country. Okay, as you can see here, for example, Kreta Iyer, Telok Ayer are belonging to the Chinese groups, okay, whereas Malays would occupy areas like Ayer Rajah, Marine Parade, Tampines, and the Indians would occupy, say, Naval Base and so on and so forth. So we do not want this. We do not like this because this actually limits the amount of interaction that we have. And as we discussed previously, common space is very important for social cohesion. Okay, which is why EIP exists as a way, okay, for different people of different ethnic groups actually to come together, okay, and actually have this common interaction. Okay, similarly, all right, SPRQ was also introduced, the Singapore Permanent Resident Quota. It's the same idea of EIP, but instead of ethnicity, we're talking about between citizens and PR. Okay, so again, we do not want PR and new immigrants to create their own enclaves. Okay, so we mix PRs and citizens together in the same estates, in the same blocks. And of course, naturalization wise, all new citizens must go through something called the Singapore Citizenship Journey, okay, which is essentially lessons about Singapore's policies, history, and going around Singapore, engaging with different communities and learning essentially the way that Singapore lives, in the hopes that they would actually integrate, okay, and adapt to that. Common space, again, very interestingly, national service is a common space as well. Why? Because it brings together all male Singaporeans and all second gen PRs, okay, to serve national service, and going through the tough training, okay, and bonding together from that training allows for actually a very, very good common space. So be it during the training or even after the training, there is a common experience that a majority of Singaporeans and PRs and even new citizens go through. Okay, and that's something they can actually talk about and share about their experiences and bond over. Okay, so NS is actually a very good common space example. Of course, there have been other initiatives where we are getting more funds, more opportunities to get people in integrated. So different programs, like I said, your RC programs, your CC programs, all these things are part of our idea of integration. That's not to say integration is 100% successful or 100% beneficial. No, not the case. Okay, sometimes okay there have been tensions because of it. For example, Singaporeans might think that because of this, the immigration policies are too liberal. Okay, so that means that more and more we're encouraging more and more and more immigrants coming to Singapore, and there's less and less and less for the Singapore citizens. Okay, and this is something that we discussed in the previous topic about the competition for resources, right, and social mobility issues. Other people argue that with more and more immigrants, okay, coming to Singapore, okay, the cohesion and the identity, okay, in Singapore has become weaker, because indeed, okay, there are some immigrants that still refuse, okay, to integrate into Singapore society. So be it not wanting to speak in English and hindering integration efforts and so on and so forth, okay, or sticking to their own groups, their own former nationalities. Okay, it does exist, and this is a weakness of integration. Without the forceful nature of assimilation in France, for example, okay, it's very difficult to really get a common identity as such. Okay, but the tension lies in essentially these people want to be here but don't want to be us. Okay, that is the very simple mindset that I think a lot of people have with the influx of migrants and immigrants. Yeah, and so this was seen in the Curry incident, which was essentially in 2011 there was a case, okay, or rather a resurfacing of a case where an Indian family, I believe, okay, was actually told, okay, by or rather the debate lay, okay, between the fact that this Chinese family from China, okay, did not like the smell of the Indian family next door cooking of the curry lah, okay, and they went to a community mediator, and the resolution, okay, was that the Indian family could only cook curry when the Chinese family was not around. Okay, and that's how they mediated the situation. Now, years after, in 2011, people actually realized this, okay, and it spread like wildfire across social media. And the idea is that why is, okay, a immigrant family from China criticizing a native Singaporean Indian family on their cooking practices and their cultural practices? Okay, if you're coming to, the argument made was, if you're coming to Singapore, you should be used to this kind of thing. Okay, you should get used to this kind of thing. And people were criticizing why was the decision so beneficial for the Chinese immigrant family. But what happened was um, it was not exactly the case. Okay, this was essentially reviewed as a common solution. Okay, common solution where both parties actually agreed, both parties actually were okay with this arrangement. Okay, it is not something that was forced upon anybody. Okay, and yeah, it slowly subsided, right? But there was a lot of havoc about it, but eventually I think um the uh, Singaporeans, I think, are quite humorous bunch of people. Okay, after the incident, there was a lot of Facebook, and back then it was only Facebook lah. Okay, Facebook posts about let's cook a pot of curry and share with one another to celebrate diversity, and indeed it did work, right? And after that, this incidents slowly faded into obscurity lah. Okay. Now, we're looking next at socio-economic diversity. So just now we are talking about social-cultural, right? Now we're talking about socio-economic diversity. Same thing. What about the individual citizens first? Now, when we talk about socio-economic diversity, we need to be aware that there are people living in different SES groups in Singapore. Okay, so the idea for individuals is number one, either we can help, okay, we can help the people in need by giving time, effort, money, okay, to people that are less fortunate than you, or the individual itself, okay, themselves, okay, can actually have the attitude of grit and perseverance to strengthen their resilience to get through the challenges and climb up the social ladder. Okay, so if there is an opportunity for the more privileged to provide for the less privileged or to help the less privileged, they should do so. But that doesn't mean that we just sit back and rely on people's help. Okay, the less privileged should also constantly put in the hard work, okay, or and that have that resilience, okay, to better their own situation. And that's the principle behind what we mentioned in citizenship as a compassionate meritocracy, right, where the privileged help the less privileged, but the less privileged also have to do their part, okay, to improve their outcomes. Yeah. Okay, so when a group of people doing this come together to help the less fortunate, they are as part of community groups, and the benefits of that is, of course, they have the financial resources, they have the guidance, they have all the connections that you need, okay, to make this kind of helping the needy and less fortunate a much more effective endeavor. Yeah. Okay. Now, for governments, again, we're looking at two case studies. Okay, of course, in the previous syllabus, we're actually talking about healthcare. Okay, but now healthcare is just a small portion. Okay, and there are many different kind of healthcare system that countries choose to employ. In Singapore, we have something called the shared responsibility framework. Okay, as the name implies, the responsibility to provide and the responsibility to ensure that people actually have different, or rather people of different backgrounds are not disadvantaged, okay, by ensuring that government put in the effort and individual Singaporeans put in the effort to make it a sustainable system. Okay, so I'm going to illustrate this with a few examples. Okay, first one, healthcare. Okay, how does shared responsibility work? Okay, your parents might tell you, okay, when you go out to work, okay, a portion of your CPF, okay, the monthly wages that you earn, a portion will go to CPF, and a portion of that actually gets transferred into your MediSave account. Okay, MediSave account is a compulsory part of the compulsory social savings scheme. Okay, and essentially becomes a fund, right, a mandatory savings account, okay, where you actually use for serious medical treatment. Okay, and that actually incorporates the personal responsibility element, right? Because at the end of the day, it might not seem like it, but it is still your money. Like, you earn that money. It just so happens that it is compulsory that you put into this saving account. Okay, so it is a responsibility of the individuals to minimize, okay, their dependence on the healthcare system, because again, you're spending your own money. Okay, but on the government side, right, the government is obligated to make sure that healthcare costs are kept affordable. Okay, so making sure that everybody has access to healthcare when they need it. Okay, when they need it. Okay, and this is what we call universal access to healthcare. Do not get it confused. Universal access to healthcare is not the same as universal healthcare. Okay, and what is universal healthcare? I'll talk about that in the next case study. Okay, so yeah, essentially we're trying to keep healthcare affordable for everyone so that everybody has access to it. So no Singaporeans denied healthcare. That's the government's role. But for us, okay, we need to make sure that our contributions, our okay, responsibility in freeing up the resources in not overspending, over consuming healthcare resources, makes it so that there are the people that truly need the medical assistance can get the medical assistance. Okay, so subsidies are, I think, very common if you have been in and around GPs or hospitals, which I assume is most people. Okay, there are direct subsidies. For example, if you go to a hospital, they will provide up to 80% of your total bill, okay, depending on what ward you stay lah when you're in hospital. Okay, CHAS scheme, okay, community health assist scheme, okay, this is the one with your green card, orange card, blue card, all these things. Okay, that's for you to get discounts, okay, and subsidies at private clinics. And this is a good example of what we call means testing. Okay, so green, orange, blue represent different level of subsidy, different level of benefits. Okay, and of course it is dependent on how much, okay, you can actually afford healthcare. So for those that are less privileged, that do not have a significant sum to spend on healthcare, okay, they get more benefits because they need it more. Okay, that's the idea behind means testing. Okay, our three M's, okay, is what the framework we call our general health accessibility scheme. Okay, MediSave is the one I said was the compulsory savings scheme, where you contribute a monthly wage and only withdraw for medical use. MediShield Life is compulsory healthcare insurance. Okay, it covers every Singaporean. Okay, and we contribute to the premium, right? Premium being the amount you actually subscribe to the insurance lah. Everybody will have to contribute to it. Okay, and the common pool, the common amount of money that we collect from everybody is the money that is going to help you, okay, cover your healthcare needs. Yeah. Okay, and of course this again highlights personal responsibility, right? Because remember, it is your money being put in. Okay, your money being put in becoming our money. If everybody misuse our money, we're going to have no money left. Okay, and that's why the government strongly, abhorrently, okay, refuses and highlights the importance of not over consuming in the healthcare system. Okay, if not, that will lead to very, very severe sustainability issue. Okay, MediFund is an endowment fund, okay, that helps people who cannot pay their medical bills after subsidies. So these are for the very, very less privileged. Okay, so even after all the subsidies, all the insurance and so on and so forth, you still cannot afford the healthcare that you need. Okay, this is when the government will top up for you. Okay, and they'll pay essentially almost all of your medical bills. Okay, and these are really for people that really, really cannot afford it. Okay, and this is what we mean by equal access to healthcare, right? Even if you cannot afford it, if you try, you really cannot afford it, don't worry, there will always be a safety net. That is the idea behind this 3M scheme. Okay, same for education. Okay, subsidies will ensure that all Singaporean children have access to quality preschools for their good start in life. Okay, same thing. Okay, I've chosen preschool because it is one of the first major costs, okay, that the new family might have, okay, or might be concerned about. Okay, so lower income families will actually only pay $3 per month at preschools funded by the government. Okay, so that ensures that their children, okay, our children are not disadvantaged from the beginning of their life in education. Everybody gets a fair and quality start to education. Public housing, same thing. Okay, affordable housing is something that is being guaranteed. Okay, again, you can pay for your home using the CPF savings that is mandatory, right, but there's also all the different grants and the schemes that allow you to actually have different opportunities to purchase housing that are able to meet your needs but also won't break the bank. Yeah, so in general, financial support is available. Long-term assistance if you're disabled, if you're old, if you have a chronic illness, okay, or if you really don't have money, okay, long-term assistance is provided to ensure that you don't fall through the crack in the event of things like COVID happening again, okay, where suddenly a lot of people get retrenched or they lose their jobs. Okay, this short to medium term assistance is provided to allow you to get back on your feet and restart, okay, and upskill and restart, okay, after the crisis is over. Okay, same thing with GST increases. Okay, GST vouchers have always been provided for people most disrupted by the GST increases, so your low income families, and these GST vouchers help to offset the increased GST. okay, for these lower income, middle income households. And yeah, of course, skills future, right? The opportunity to upskill and maintain relevance. Workfare skill support allows for a training, cash awards, okay, to encourage lower wage Singaporeans to upskill their skills lah. Again, sounds good, but not it's not always okay beneficial. There are some challenges. For example, sustainability issues relating to aging population. Definitely, by the end of this decade, okay, the number of seniors in Singapore will double. Okay, the number of young citizens will decrease, and so the burden, okay, the burden on government funding and the burden on the tax dollars of the smaller, younger working class will become very, very great. Okay, so you must imagine after you go old, you retire, right? You're no longer working, you're no longer contributing to the economy. So who's paying the tax? The tax is being paid by the smaller working class. Okay, already there's not enough people, yet the amount they have to pay is increased. So it's increasingly heavy cost. Okay, and that is the problem we have with the aging population. Fewer working adults supporting more older people, the cost that each working adult needs to shoulder will be even higher. Yeah, so again, that lowers productivity, it decreases output, and it slows economic growth, which again poses a question about whether or not we can sustain this kind of framework. Yeah, same thing. Because of that, we also have to increase taxation to ensure that government revenue will continue to be high so that we can actually carry out the things that we want to do. Okay, so higher income earners will earn proportionately higher tax. Okay, whereas in order to attract foreigners, okay, and foreign companies to come and invest in Singapore, okay, we actually have very low, okay, business tax in Singapore. Okay, problem is that higher tax rate on Singaporeans will mean that the burden is again increased. So imagine, I'm already earning so less, but I have even less workers now, right? And I have to support an even greater elderly population. Okay, so I really earn so less. Some more the tax increase means I get to take home even less money for myself. Okay, that is part of the problem. It's not sustainable because of this aging population issue. Okay, and again, there is certain limitations. Okay, so we can say upskill, we can say train. Okay, but if people don't get away from the idea that older workers are not less productive or less whatever than younger people, okay, it's never gonna work, right? So with retirement now set at 65, re-employment soon to be set at 70, okay, mature workers will need to work longer, right? And it might be difficult, okay, for employers to sustain and retain their older workers. Okay, so the second case study here we're looking at is Sweden, a Nordic country, and what they have is what we call a government financed framework. Okay, this is essentially government pay for everything. Okay, to put it very, very simply. Healthcare, okay, in Sweden is public, okay, which means that public funds, your tax money actually funds all of these things. Okay, so therefore, okay, for them, the Swedes, okay, everybody above the age of 20 will only need to pay 9 euros per day if you're hospitalized and capped at 122. For medication in a year, okay, it's also capped at 122 euros. For a family, all of the children, okay, so whether you have 1 children or 5 children, okay, the maximum you pay is 244 euros for all your children in a year. Okay, once that is reached, okay, 100% subsidies means you don't need to pay a single cent, okay, after the 244 euro limit is reached. Same thing, education is free and compulsory, so you don't need to pay school fees, and you are forced to go for schooling all the way until 16 years old, so equivalent of sec 4 your age. Okay, yeah, so free school lunch, free access to medical staff, so if you get sick, okay, you have a free doctor, free nurse, free psychologist there, all for you, okay, all to take care of your welfare. Okay, and even for university students, Okay, university students or polytechnic students, okay, their fees are all fully subsidized, which means they do not need to pay a single cent from preschool all the way until they graduate from university, be it with a bachelor's, a master's, or even a PhD. Okay, everything in education is free. Housing. Now, housing, okay, lower income individuals actually get allowance to pay their housing fees, right? And housing allowance, if you live with children, you get housing allowance, which is money lah that they give you, okay, if you pay more than 125 euros per month for your housing. Okay, for limited income, for elderly, there are also a housing supplement, which is literally you don't need to pay. I literally give you the money for you to sustain your living condition. Sounds too good to be true, right? Okay, it is true, it is happening in Sweden, but of course they are facing a lot of sustainability challenges as well. Okay, same thing, Sweden has the same problem as us, aging population. So more people retire, smaller working population, more costs. So more cost falls on the smaller working population. Okay, so people will need to have need to work longer lah, need to have increased taxes. And by the way, Swedish taxes are really very very high. Okay, very very high. Here, the highest income earners in Sweden pay 57.2% income tax. Okay, 57.2% income tax, which means more than half of your salary is gone. Okay, and GST in Singapore, people already complain at 9%. Again, 2024, already complaining. In Sweden, their equivalent, the VAT, is 25%. 25% tax on everything that you buy. Okay, everything that you buy. They also have a immigration unemployment. Okay, so Sweden is actually very open to immigration recently. Okay, but the problem is a lot of these new immigrants become dependent on the state because they cannot find a job. Be it because their certificate is not recognized lah, or they are unable to assess the skill. A lot of these immigrants are unable to actually find a job and unable to sustain itself. So by obligation, the government has to help them, right, and give them everything that they need, and that can rack up very very quickly if you have more and more immigrants. Okay, so as you can see, we have talked about social-cultural diversity, we have talked about socio-economic diversity. I think the individuals and the groups part, I think is very straightforward, it's very obvious. Perhaps what you need to pay more attention towards is the government part. Okay, in terms of the acculturation policy, so responding to social-cultural diversity, France's assimilation versus Singapore's integration. And yes, they will ask you to compare in your questions. Same thing for the socio-economic diversity, the Singapore shared responsibility framework, and of course the Swedish government finance framework. Just remember, there's no one that's better or worse than the other. Okay, they both have pros, they both have cons. Okay, again, it's really up to you on how you really want to evaluate, okay, the success relative to one another. Okay, but nonetheless, we have come to the end of this topic and the issue of diversity as a whole. Okay, and yeah, indeed, diversity is a very very interesting topic. Okay, and it's something that's truly practical that you can see all around you, and the tensions and also the benefits are very very real. Okay, for all of us. Now, in the next topic, we'll start on the final issue, which is globalization. Okay, where we'll start to go away from just Singapore towards the wider world out there, and how we are all connected to one another in the modern world. Okay, so as always, keep on studying hard, right? Keep on keeping on, right? Take care of yourselves, and all the best for your revisions and upcoming papers. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next lecture. All right, bye bye.